Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me closely. Your life can transform by what you choose to keep to yourself. Let's start with something you already know, but maybe ignoring. Not everything needs to be shared. In fact, oversharing can hurt your mental clarity, damage your relationships, and sabotage your goals. Today, I'll walk you three specific that neuroscience and psychology agree should stay private. Let's begin. When you share your goals too early, especially the ones that matter most to you, your dream career, your body transformation, that business idea, you might feel like you're doing something productive. You imagine the outcome, you talk about the vision, you even get excited responses from others. But here's the problem. Your brain can't tell the difference between talking about progress and actually making progress. In neuroscience, this is known as social reality substitution. Every time you tell someone about your ambition, your brain releases a small dose of dopamine. That same chemical is responsible for motivation, drive, and focus. But instead of fueling your next action step, the dopamine gets released prematurely. Just by talking, your brain rewards you for something you haven't even done yet. And when that happens enough times, you start to feel satisfied just by talking about the dream. The urgency to act disappears. You feel accomplished, but nothing has really changed. This is more common than people think. Say you want to write a book, you tell 5 friends. They're impressed. They call you ambitious, disciplined, creative. You haven't written a single chapter, but you're already seen as a writer. That identity feels good. You start to believe in the fantasy of achievement instead of the real work it requires. So instead of sitting down for 2 hours to write, you find yourself spending more time explaining your idea than executing it. There's also a psychological concept called intention-behavior gap. It refers to the space between what we intend to do and what we actually do. The more you talk, the wider the gap becomes. Talking gives the illusion of progress, and when your mind gets tricked into thinking you've already made progress, it loses the pressure to act, and pressure, just the right amount of it, is essential for performance. Without it, we get lazy with our dreams. Another issue is accountability. People often think sharing goals makes them more accountable. But accountability only works when the person you share it with actually holds you accountable. Most people won't. They'll support you emotionally, maybe offer encouragement, but they won't follow up. They won't sit down with you after a month and ask, where are the results? So instead of real accountability, you get social validation, which feels good, but doesn't move you forward. Let's go deeper. The more you talk about what you're going to do, the more your identity becomes tied to the idea, not the action. This creates an emotional attachment to being seen a certain way. You become more concerned with looking like someone on the path to greatness rather than being someone who quietly walks that path every day. And when things get hard, as they always do, you're less likely to stick with it because your focus was never on the process. It was on the performance of progress. Now, contrast that with someone who doesn't talk. They wake up early, train in silence, build when no one's watching. When they finally speak, they have results to show. Their voice carries weight because it's backed by effort. Their confidence isn't inflated by likes or applause. It's built on discipline. That's the kind of power you want. This isn't about being secretive or paranoid. It's about understanding how the brain works and using that to your advantage. Keep your goals sacred. Protect them like a seed underground. Let them grow roots before you show the world the plant. Because once you get hooked on talking, you lose the fire to build. And in the long run, that fire, protected and focused, is what separates the people who dream from the people who do. Venting feels good in the moment. It's a release. You've had a bad argument with your partner. You feel misunderstood. Emotions are high. And so you reach out to someone. You start explaining everything, what they said it, what you think it really meant. That friend listens, maybe agrees, maybe adds a few comments. You feel better for a while. But here's what's happening inside your brain every time you repeat that storing, you're reinforcing it. Neurons that fire together wire together. That's a basic rule of neuroplasticity. So each time you relive the same argument, each time you replay the emotion behind the words, you're strengthening that neural pathway. You're practicing the pain. What started as a single event becomes something bigger, deeper, something that's burned into your mind. And eventually, it starts to shape how you think about the entire relationship. What makes it worse is that the brain doesn't distinguish much between real-time experience and recalled experience. If your heart raced during the fight, it will probably race again when you talk about it. If your stomach dropped during the insult, you'll feel tension again when you replay it. So the emotional charge doesn't just go away. It gets rehearsed, memorized, reinforced. And there's another layer to this when you bring someone else into your relationship problems, especially someone not qualified to help. You invite their biases, their projections, and their emotional history into your relationship. They might mean well, they might even give decent advice. But most of the time, their input isn't neutral. It's shaped by their own pasting, their trust issues, their beliefs about love, their personal pain. So now you're no longer looking at the relationship clearly. You're seeing it through your lens and theirs. This creates a split. You start to have two relationships, one with your partner and one with the people you've talked to about your partner. And sometimes those two relationships don't align. One version might be filled with pain and complaints. The other might still be full of love, effort, and healing. But the more you talk negatively, the harder it becomes to see the good. Your mind keeps score, even if your heart is trying to forgive. There's also the damage to trust. If your partner finds out you've shared private moments, arguments, or personal flaws with others, it can shatter the foundation of safety. People want to know that their vulnerable side is protected, that their worst moment isn't public knowledge. Every relationship needs a container, a space where both people can speak freely, mess up, and recover without worrying that it will be used against them in a group chat. Of course, this doesn't mean you should never talk about problems, but choose your audience wisely. A therapist, a coach, someone trained to guide, not judge, someone who will bring you back to your own behavior, not just criticize your partners. Growth happens when you reflect, not when you gossip. In healthy relationships, people grow through conflict. They learn each other's pain, stress responses, emotional triggers. But that can only happen if the focus stays inside the relationship, not spread across multiple opinions and assumptions. There's power in privacy. There's growth in doing the hard emotional work within the relationship. And when you stop outsourcing your pain, when you stop repeating the story just to feel seen, something deeper happens. You learn to self-regulate. You learn to breathe through emotion instead of broadcast it. You build strength instead of dependence. And most importantly, you give your relationship a real chance to heal, evolve, and deepen without the noise of the outside world. Every time you go over a painful experience in your mind, whether it's an argument, a betrayal, a failure, you're not just remembering it. You're living it. The brain doesn't store memories like a file in a cabinet. It reactivates the emotional, physical, and psychological patterns that were present in the original moment. So each time you replay the story of pain, frustration, or regret, you're not just reflecting, you're reinforcing. This is how the brain works. It builds strength in the circuits you use the most. That's the foundation of neuroplasticity. If you repeat something often enough, whether it's a physical habit, a thought pattern, or an emotional reaction, it becomes easier to access, becomes automatic. So when you constantly repeat painful stories, your brain wires itself to always expect pain, to search for it, and to amplify. Imagine a trail in the woods. The more you walk that same path, the clearer it becomes. Soon it's the default route. Easy to find, easy to follow. That's what happens when you keep talking about the same emotional wounds. You build a highway of pain in your nervous system. And eventually, even neutral situations start triggering those same emotions just because the pathways are so well worn. People often mistake this for healing. They think that talking about the same thing over and over helps them process it. But real processing doesn't just mean repetition. It means understanding, integration, and letting go. If you're not moving toward resolution, then what you're doing is a rehearsal. And rehearsal of pain doesn't lead to peace. It leads to bitterness. There's also a biochemical layer to this. When you remember emotional pain, your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prepare your body for danger. Your heart rate goes up, your muscles tense, your breathing changes. And if you keep revisiting the same pain, your body stays in that fight or flight state longer than it needs to. That can lead to anxiety, sleep problems, weakened immunity, and emotional fatigue. It becomes a loop. You feel pain. You talk about it. That reinforces the memory. The memory triggers the emotion. And the emotion feels so familiar, you talk about it again. Around and around it goes. You become emotionally stuck. Not because of what happened, but because of how often you keep reactivating it. And the truth is, not everyone deserves access to your pain. When you tell the wrong person, someone who's passive judgmental or self-absorbed, you don't get clarity. You get confusion. You get mixed advice, shallow responses, or worse, silence. That can make the pain feel even bigger. It confirms the belief that no one understands you, that you're alone in your struggle. So the pain deepens and you go back to replaying it, trying to find resolution through repetition. But resolution doesn't come from repeating the story. It comes from rewriting it. You have to ask, what is the story I'm telling myself? And is it helping me move forward or keeping me anchored in the past? You can't control what happened, but you can choose how you relate to it. You can train your mind to reflect without rehearsing, to learn without looping. That's the difference between healing and self-sabotage. Sometimes is more powerful than speaking. Sometimes restraint is what sets you free. When you stop rehearsing the pain, you give space for something new, clarity, strength, growth. You become less reactive, more reflective. And eventually, the wound stops defining you because you stopped feeding it. You stopped repeating it. You started healing. That's the real work. Not just remembering what broke you, but choosing not to relive it every time you speak. Talking about your income might seem harmless, even empowering. You might feel like you're being transparent or open. Maybe you think sharing your financial success will inspire others or show them what's possible. But the moment your earnings become public knowledge, whether through conversation, subtle bragging, or online posts, something shifts. Not just in how others see you, but in how they treat you. There's a psychological concept called Ezer's relative deprivation. It means people don't just evaluate their lives based on how they're doing. They evaluate based on how they think you're doing compared to them. So even if someone is doing okay financially, hearing about your success might trigger insecurity, jealousy, or self-doubt. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your success makes them question their own. And once that happens, the relationship changes. Sometimes subtly, sometimes drastically. The brain is wired to notice hierarchy. We instinctively sort people into categories above us, below us, or equal to us. And money is one of the quickest ways people make those judgments. So when someone learns you're earning more than them, it can create discomfort. They might start pulling away. They might question your motives. They might expect favors. Or they might feel silently resentful, thinking you're lucky, privileged, or undeserving. That dynamic can make social interactions feel strained. What used to be light and relaxed now has tension. People start second guessing your words. Are you offering advice or bragging? Are you being generous or showing off? Even if your intentions are pure, perception becomes the problem. On the flip side, if you earn less than someone and they know it, you might start feeling uncomfortable. Maybe you start comparing. Maybe you feel pressure to catch up. Or maybe you begin to doubt your value, not based on who you are, but based on what you make. That's how financial transparency, when handled poorly, can lead to emotional insecurity for everyone involved. There's also a cultural aspect. In many places, talking about money is taboo for a reason, not because it's shameful, but because it invites unnecessary tension. Money has always carried emotional weight. It represents status, freedom, power, and control. So when you talk about it openly, you're not just sharing numbers, you're broadcasting identity. And that identity can attract admiration or judgment, envy or expectation. Privacy around money isn't about secrecy, it's about boundaries. It's about protecting your relationships from dynamics that can erode trust or intimacy. Because once people start relating to you based on what you have instead of who you are, the foundation becomes shaky. This doesn't mean you should never talk about money. There are situations where sharing is helpful, like mentoring financial education or business transparency. But context matters, intent matters, and most importantly, audience matters. You have to ask yourself, is this person emotionally mature enough to handle this information without comparison, expectation, or judgment? There's a strength in keeping certain details to yourself. When you protect your financial status, you give people the chance to connect with you, not your paycheck. You remove the filter of comparison and let relationships form on deeper ground. You also keep your own mindset clean, free from the pressure to maintain an image or prove your worth through numbers. In a world obsessed with display, privacy becomes power. Let your success show through your discipline, your calm, your generosity, not your balance sheet. Because the moment you stop using money as an identity, you start using it as a tool. And tools are meant to build, not impress. So be mindful. Share what serves. Protect what matters. Because silence, when chosen wisely, doesn't hide value. It preserves it. When you share something personal, your truth, your feelings, your story, you expect people to understand. You hope they'll see you clearly, accept your intentions, and support your journey. But that's not always what happens, because most people don't respond to EU. They respond to how what you said makes them feel. And that reaction is filtered through their own insecurities, past experiences, and emotional triggers. So even if your words are honest and harmless, they can still be misunderstood, misjudged, or rejected. Here's the reality: people carry their own emotional history. When you speak, your words enter a space that's already filled with their fears, their doubts, and their unresolved pain. So instead of hearing you with clarity, they project their inner world onto your message. That means your truth can be distorted, not because it's wrong, but because it touches something sensitive in them. Let's say you share that you're finally setting boundaries, something you've needed for a long time. You tell someone that you won't tolerate disrespect anymore, that you're focusing on your mental health. You expect support. But instead, they get defensive. They say you're acting cold, selfish, distant. Why? Because your growth threatens their comfort. Your boundary highlights the lack of boundaries in their own life. So they don't respond to your strength. They react from their own fear of being abandoned, judged, or exposed. This is common in human behavior. The brain is wired to protect its identity. When someone else's truth challenges that identity, even unintentionally, it can feel like a threat. So people react emotionally, not logically. They criticize you not because what you said is wrong, but because they're not ready to confront their own limitations. And this doesn't just happen with strangers. It happens with family, friends, even partners. You speak from a place of clarity. They listen from a place of insecurity. You open up with trust. They respond with resistance, not because they don't love you, but because love doesn't automatically equal emotional maturity. Many people love deeply, but still struggle to listen without projecting. That's why emotional intelligence matters. It's not just about expressing yourself. It's about recognizing can hold your truth without twisting it. Some people haven't done the work. They haven't faced their own pain, so they can't hold space for yours. They turn your vulnerability into discomfort. Your honesty becomes too loud for their denial. And here's the danger: when you keep sharing your truth with people who can't receive it well, you start to shrink. You doubt yourself. You wonder if you're being too sensitive, too much, or too honest. But the problem isn't your honesty. It's the ears you're giving it to. Not every room deserves your voice. Not every person deserves access to your truth. You need discernment. You need to ask does this person have the emotional capacity to hold what I'm about to share? Can they hear me without needing to defend themselves? Can they listen without making it about them? If the answer is no, silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. Protecting your truth doesn't mean hiding it. It means placing it in safe hands. It means choosing connection over reaction. It means being strong enough to speak, but smart enough to wait for the right listener. Because at the end of the day, your truth deserves to be heard, not filtered through insecurity, but honored with clarity. And until someone has earned the right to hear your deeper layers, you're not being guarded, you're being grounded. You're choosing peace over chaos, safety over confusion. And that's not selfish. That's survival. Speak your truth, but don't waste it on those who aren't ready to receive it. Let your energy go where it can grow, not where it has to defend itself just to exist. The people you trust with your secrets today may not hold the same loyalty tomorrow. This isn't a cynical way of looking at relationships. It's a recognition of how unpredictable human behavior can be when emotions, circumstances, and intentions shift over time. When you share your deepest vulnerabilities with someone, you're handing them a piece of yourself. But once it's out of your mouth, it's no longer in your control. That truth can be kept, twisted, or weaponized, depending on who's holding it. Here's the hard reality: loyalty has an expiration date for many people. Someone who cares about you today might feel hurt, angry, or betrayed tomorrow. And in that emotional state, the very secrets they once promised to protect can become ammunition. It's not always intentional. But when people feel wounded or threatened, their sense of morality can become distorted. The emotional need to defend themselves, or even to hurt you back, can override their memory of the connection you once shared. And sometimes people don't need to be hurt to share what they shouldn't. They just get careless. They gossip in the name of concern. They share just one detail with someone they trust. But that detail spreads. One person becomes two, two becomes 10. Before you know it, your private world be public knowledge, not because you were wrong to trust, but because you trusted someone who lacked discipline. The brain is wired for social bonding. We form connections by sharing stories, feelings, and secrets. But that same drive can lead people to overshare, especially if it gives them a moment of attention or validation. And unfortunately, there are individuals who feel more powerful when they hold information others don't. They may never use it directly, but they keep it like a card in their back pocket, ready to be played when it benefits them. It's not paranoia to be cautious, it's wisdom. You don't need to isolate yourself or assume everyone is untrustworthy, but you do need to earnestly observe how people behave when they're angry, jealous, or under pressure. Do they stay silent, or do they leak what they swore to protect? Pay attention not to how someone treats you when everything is good, but how they talk about others when they're upset, because that's how they'll talk about you when the tides turn. There's another layer to this. Your secrets are tied to your identity. When they're exposed without context, they lose meaning. Someone can share your truth in a way that makes you look weak, unstable, or broken, when in reality, those moments may have been part of your greatest transformation. But if someone shares that chapter without understanding the whole story, they paint an incomplete, often damaging picture of who you are. That's why silence is powerful. Not silence from fear, but silence from intention. When you choose not to share everything with everyone, you keep control over your narrative. You keep your strength intact. You protect your evolving identity from the opinions of people who may never understand your journey. There's nothing weak about being private. In fact, Some of the strongest people are the quietest about their struggles. They process internally. They grow in silence, and when they speak from wisdom, not impulse. They don't feel the need to prove anything or confess everything. They move with clarity because they've learned that not everyone who listens is loyal, and not everyone who smiles is safe. So be mindful of what you share and with whom. Don't give people the power to define you by a moment you've outgrown. Hold your truth close. Let it be earned, not assumed. Because once it's out in the open, you can't control how it's handled, but you can control who you trust. And that decision might protect you from a world of regret.